Let's go page 438. And the USDA, Rural Economic and Community Development Services. What do you guys know about this type of financing, or the USDA? Farms. That was the intention originally, wasn't it? To help farmers keep their farms going, borrow money for repairs or projects, maybe like the home improvement, and to keep them in business. What else do you know?
40 years.
40 years for
The
the loan could be amortized for a term of 40 years. Let me give you some just some highlights here. If you read over this section, we're still in our level 1 section, everyone. And so I would get a general idea of what all this means. And so overall, it's about rural areas. A rural area would be an area where the population is less than 10,000. An area, maybe we could even say, an area that you don't have much turnover, you know, not much turnover, housing and farming and that sort of thing. But anyways, for a rural area, 10,000 population or less, it's generally for lower than average income too. So these folks are in rural areas. It might be farmland. It is agriculture, under that agricultural department. And so this guarantees some loans. It gives direct loans. Eligibility requirements would have to be the rural area, less income than the mean, the average. Longer repayment, like Ahmad said. Low down payment. Interest rates can even be low. Did they say in there an interest rate could even be as low as 1%? So in other words, these loans would be subsidized by the government. Used to be, I can remember when the whole town or city of Kernersville qualified for USDA loans. Now that's changed over the years, but because Kernersville has really grown over the years.
Way too much.
Huh?
It's gotten way too much. I grew up in Kernersville.
Oh, you did?
And now it's almost like Wendover. I used to be able to drive to Kernersville, get everywhere in Kernersville in 5 to 10 minutes. Now it's a 20-minute drive just to get from my house to the school that used to take 5 minutes.
Wow.
There's so much traffic.
So much
And
traffic.
it's such a one-way, you know, there's not a lot of bigger streets with more lanes, I guess.
So, used to be, I can remember getting calls and people saying, I want to look in Kernersville. And I can remember thinking, way over there? Way in Kernersville? Times have changed. Guys, I remember that, the Cardinal. The Cardinal used to be way out there. And now the roads, we've progressed, haven't we? The roads have just made things so much more accessible. But Kernersville used to be, that whole town was qualified for USDA loans. So that would be one thing to make sure you would ask a lender, is this part of town, can we use USDA? And so that would depend if it qualifies for it. Let's look at some other types of loans. Purchase money mortgage. Now, it does tell you that it's owner financing in this section. Now, we talked about owner financing, seller financing in our sales contract unit, Unit 10. Remember when we learned about the installment land contract, or the contract for deed is another name for it? Tell me what you remember about that, because these are similar but different.
On the, I guess the owner finance, they get the title themselves, plus paid for.
Jose said on the installment land contract, the seller kept the title until the loan was paid for. Everybody remember that? On the purchase money mortgage, it's not the same. Guys, that would be the one difference. They're both considered seller financing. The installment land contract we learned about was a sales contract, including seller financing. This section here is only seller financing, called purchase money mortgage. The seller is carrying back the financing, acting like a bank, and the title would transfer at the closing, just like if you went to BB&T and got a loan with BB&T. Now, they do say that this purchase money mortgage does have a dual meaning. In other words, it really is almost any kind of a loan. Somebody's carrying back the loan. But typically speaking, when we see this terminology, we usually think about seller financing, purchase money mortgage. And so what else do you know about purchase money mortgage? What else do you know about seller financing?
They're not allowed to file a deficiency judgment.
They're not allowed to go after deficiency. Why, Kim?
Not sure.
Not sure?
Because they have the property.
Well, because what?
Because they have the.
They can take the property. You know, they can take the property, they've got the equity, they've got the payments, and so they can take the property. And seller financing does enjoy a little bit of priority and lien order. They'll never get in front of real estate property taxes, but they will get in front of some judgment liens and maybe even a mechanic lien, you know, just depending. Let's look at some of these other loans. Package, blanket, open end. Everyone, I would try to keep it as simple as I could or as I can. A package loan, visualize a package. You know, the entire thing is being financed. Entire thing, I mean real estate and personal property. Didn't we say when we learned about our sales contract that the lender doesn't want a lot of personal property added to the sales contract because they don't want to give the impression or they don't want to finance any kind of personal property for 30 years? Well, that's not the case in areas that do that, where it's commonplace that folks buy property completely furnished, like in resort areas. If you go down to the beach, you're bound to see condos for sale that say completely furnished. And the type of financing would be something like this. This package loan, the lender knows they're financing the real estate and the personal property all in one. A blanket loan covers, blankets cover, don't they? So a blanket loan covers one parcel of property, but it's one parcel of property that's going to be developed, maybe platted out, and the lots are going to be sold out from under that one mortgage. And when it's sold, like a developer gets one loan, it's called a blanket loan with multiple parcels. As each parcel is sold maybe to a builder, then it's going to be released out from under that blanket loan. And they call it a partial release clause. It will be released out from under the total blanket loan. Open-end loans would be like a line of credit. How many of you have a line of credit on your checking account? You know, lots of us do. I do. I hate to use it because it's expensive to use, but it's nice to know it's there. You know, so it's there if you need to use it. And so oftentimes when people go in to qualify for a loan, the lender might say, on this particular property, we could go ahead and qualify you for your home equity line of credit too at the same time. In other words, it'll be there if you need it. And they may issue checks. And so once that you start using it, then a home equity loan has been created. So it's a line of credit there if you need it, and then when you start using it, it would be a home equity loan. Next page, construction loans. Why would a construction loan be a risky loan to the lender? Why would it be the riskiest loan to the lender?
But there's nothing they can go back for other than the land.
Jose said the risk is, what are they going to go back for if there's a default other than the land? Because it might be the building in progress, and how valuable is that? Probably not too much. And lenders don't like to lend on land, everybody. That's risky to the lender. And so, risky loan. So but the contractor probably wants a term loan. What's a term loan?
Set period of time.
Well, it could be short-term, but it has another meaning. It probably is short-term, but it also has another meaning. How about interest only? Term loans are interest-only loans, and what that means is if it's interest only, the contractor, the builder's paying only the I part, right? There's no PI. So if there's no PI, that means that it's not being amortized. Generally short-term, interest only. If you think about it, why would a contractor care if they're paying principal for 9 months or a year? It isn't gonna go to much anyway, is it? And so they're just borrowing the money. And the lender's gonna lend them at different stages. You know, they're gonna advance the money, I should say, at different stages, after they see a certain amount of work is done. The sale and the leaseback, literally the words describe what it is. Did that make sense in your reading, the sale and the leaseback? Did it make sense to you that it might be mainly commercial property that's done that way? What is a sale and leaseback? Anybody? What's a sale and leaseback?
Would that be like a shopping center, where you have a lease?
Sold to the restaurant and leased back to the seller.
Yeah. Amber said it would be like, let's just say you're an investor and you want to buy this property, but the owner of the property says, I would love to sell it, but I also want to stay here. I would like to lease it back. We would love to sell and get our equity out, but our name brand is here. You know, our sign, our business sign is here. We would like to stay. So a sale and lease back would be like that. It does say that this leans more commercial, but I don't think I would rule out residential either. You know, somebody wants to stay in their home for a while, you know, an investor buying it, why not let them rent back? You know, because you've got a built-in renter. Buy down, I want you to think about discount points. This used to be popular, I don't know, I don't know, is it?
Did a lot of these.
Did?
Did a lot of these.
Yeah.
Late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. This was done in years past as an incentive to buy this builder's property. If you make an offer on our property, we go under contract, we will buy down your interest rate. They call it a 3-2-1, where they literally buy down the rate, 3% the first year, 2% the second, and 1% the third. What an incentive. What an incentive to the would-be buyer wanting to buy that property, and if they need a loan, that the lender is going to buy down the rate. Lots of incentives used to happen, everybody, where, for example, the seller would say, we'll pay closing costs, or the seller would say, we will give a decorating allowance. What do you think about that? In an MLS sheet, you're looking at it, you're searching for a buyer, and you see an MLS sheet, and it says, seller to give a $2,000 decorating allowance. Decorating allowance. What that means is maybe new paint, new carpet, that's what they're thinking. So what do you think as an agent?
It's gonna need some work.
Huh?
That house is gonna need some work.
That's what I would think, wouldn't you?
Yep.
That house is gonna need some work. What else would you think?
Like eagerness to sell.
That's what I would think. Hamad said maybe eagerness to sell. You know, the seller might be eager to sell it, to move it, right?
Press for time, either sell and press for time.
Press for time maybe.
Don't have the time to do the repairs.
They don't have the time, or how about they don't have the money? You know, they'll leave that allowance credit out of their proceeds, but coming out of pocket, you know, I think that's one of the funniest things. I get it, because I think that reality TV, HGTV has kind of done this for us, that buyers say, well, they've always wanted better condition, but now they expect the property to be move-in, new ready. And I always had a hard time saying to the seller, you need to put in new carpet, or you need to put in new this or that. But can you imagine telling the seller, you need to update your kitchen? The money out of pocket, I mean, it just, I always had a hard time saying that, but right now, it's like it's the market. If your property is not in really tip-top shape, and if it's out of date, the consumer doesn't like it. Now, maybe the market we're in now, with low inventory, maybe buyers are willing to take less, but I don't know. I think that they're still kind of expecting the best. What do y'all think about that?
So it just depends on the area too, because where I am in Jamestown, houses go whether they're remodeled or not. Like there was a house around the corner for us for sale, and it was, the bathroom was like pink tile, just like 1970s, just exploded in the bathroom. But it's on the market for like 2 days.
Wow.
Yeah, so it just depends on the area and the motivation of the, the buyer.
Motivation of the buyer. Ma'am.
I look over like near UNCG, like Lindley Hill, Sunset, or Lindley Park, Sunset area, and the houses over there, like it really does not matter what they look like on the inside. People buy them up so quickly.
They sell like in a day. don't they?
Exactly. Like I was looking at one the other day, and from the time I like looked at it, talked to somebody about it, and went back to look at it online, it was pending. So that was like at night till the next morning.
Yeah.
Location.
Well, and its price point. I mean, the price point's the driver on that. The location is excellent, that Lindley Park, but the price point, under 200,
Right.
that's what's moving.
Yeah.
All righty, so we talked about the home equity loans. Look with me on page 441, reverse mortgage. Reverse mortgage is an FHA program, by the way, and it's intended for retirees. Now, for retirees, they say 62 years old or older. I don't know many 62-year-olds who are retiring, to be honest, except my husband did when he was 55 years old. And I'm thinking, why are you
Must
quitting
have a lot
working?
of money.
He must have had a lot of money.
You should know.
Ain't got it now. But it's a reverse mortgage. You see this advertised on TV a lot, don't you? You know, with the actors. I honestly don't know all the innards about it, but I did see an article in the paper the other day, and I meant to bring it. But it looks like there might be a lot of unknowns, or a lot of, not unknowns, a lot of misconceptions about it. That people have to pay it back, or that they can't owe any money on it on their house when they want to use this. But basically the idea is the homeowner is not paying payments to the bank. Based on how much equity they've got accumulated, the bank is making a loan with paying them payments. So they don't have to sell, they don't have to create a monthly debt. So you could argue they're using their equity a different way. Mortgage priorities, you guys know this, what would they be?
Can I ask a question about reverse
Uh-huh.
mortgage real quick? Is that like putting up your house as, like, I'm trying to like wrap my head around it real quick, but is it kind of like, if your house, it's like, never, I'm kind of going off.
Well, the property still is the collateral.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, the property still would be the collateral for the lender. The idea is it's an older person there who doesn't want to create more debt, but they've got this money sitting there and they don't want to move. And so it's a way to use their equity where the lender will pay them a little bit each month or whatever it happens to be. A loan is created that's going to have to be paid sometime, some way.
There's like damage to the property.
Well, it still would be the owner's responsibility. They're going to have to pay taxes. And Hamad is asking a good question. They're not renting it, so they own the property still. And he said, well, what if there's damage to the property? Well, the homeowner's going to have to still make repairs and pay taxes and insurance and that sort of thing.
So
All right.
the they're older,
Mhm.
let's say they're gonna die before this is paid, does the bank get the house?
No, it wouldn't be that way. The debt would be due, and so the estate would pay it. I mean, the debt's gonna have to be paid, just like any debt. If you can't pay your mortgage payment, I mean, figure out a way to pay it or the bank will foreclose, right? And so, no, the idea is that they're just not taking the property. I think that's the misconception, one of them, that you lose the property. The debt has to be paid though, one way or the other. And so the idea would be the estate or
Leave
the
it to
heirs
their families to pay that.
sell it. Thank you. They would sell it and pay it. Thank you very much. It was right there. Yeah, the property's still gonna have value. I mean, the bank's not gonna make a loan 100%. You know, so sell the property, heirs pay back the loan. So no, they're not taking the property back like that. That's a misconception. It's not gonna happen that way.
Why is it a loan?
Huh?
Why is it a loan if they have the equity in the house?
They're borrowing against their equity. It would just be like getting an equity line of credit.
Okay.
You don't want to sell your property and get the equity, so you want to borrow against that equity. Mhm. That is a little awkward to think about, because you're paying yourself back. You're using your money but paying it back. People borrow against insurance, people borrow against other assets, and they pay, like you can borrow against your IRA or your retirement, but you gotta pay it back. All righty, one term on page 441 called subordination. It's under mortgage priorities. Well, we know mortgage priorities are based on who records first, don't we? We know about the Connor Act. So what does a subordinate mean?
The lender agrees to move out of first place.
The lender has to agree to move whoever is superior to the junior is going to agree to move from first place to second place. So there would be a subordination agreement, because a subordinate is someone under, isn't it? So you're in first, will you agree to go second and let me be first? When do you think that would happen? It happens. When it happens, and I think it happens maybe more than what we think.
Would it have something to do, I'm just guessing, maybe like the person wants to, could they do it so like they could change the interest rate, and if they became the second person, they could charge it, because it said that usually second loans have a higher interest rate, so maybe like they would change the interest rate if they became second, and like,
That's an interesting thought. I see what you're saying. I don't know that they could change the terms of the note, but I see what you're saying. Who knows? It might open some negotiation. I've heard builders talk about this, everybody. Builders and developers. It's kind of like who comes first, the chicken or the egg. And if a developer wants a big loan, but the builders want loans, what lender's going to want to be in line first? Both of them probably, and they may have to agree to switch places to make this whole thing work. I've heard builders talk about it. I know a builder in town. When he told me about this, his business has really grown over the years. But when he told me about this, he was mainly in residential, buying lots and that sort of thing. And he says, Jan, I sign them all the time. You know, my bank and I sign them all the time. And our bank agrees to go under the developer's bank. And now he's doing a lot of commercial building. But I would imagine that still happens. I think it happens in that line of business.
Could that be a means of like the secondary lender getting the money that he's owed? Or is that something?
Well, it could be. You guys are on a point. What if? Well, let's see if this would work. What if you own a house and let's say the house is worth $200,000, and let's say you only owe $50,000, and that lien is on record, right? Let's say you want to borrow against your equity, and the lender will let you borrow $100,000. They might say, but we want to switch these loans in lien line. In other words, we want the 100,000 to be the first one that's collected instead of the second. Because remember when we talked about foreclosure, it said if there's a foreclosure, it brings the junior liens to a stop. Excellent, excellent point. All righty, everybody. The lending practices on 441, when we go in to apply for a loan, go over to the next couple of pages and look at what the process is, if you don't mind. When we apply for a loan, what's the real driver of us getting a loan? What's the real credit score? The credit score is the big thing, isn't it? And what do y'all think about the credit score? Sometimes that's called the FICO score, but what do y'all think about that?
It tells the bank of whether you pay on time or you don't.
It tells whether you pay on time or you don't. That's one feature. What else?
How much debt you have,
How much debt you have,
Or open lines of credit.
or open lines of credit.
It's just a basic indicator on how safe that loan is gonna be.
It's a basic indicator of the risk, how safe this is gonna be. So you could pay your debt on time, but if you got a lot of debt, they're thinking, how are you managing your money? Or are you borrowing a lot? I've always heard, I don't know if you have, that, there are these ads that say consolidate your loans into one loan, make one payment instead of all of these. Well, that doesn't look good on your credit score. It looks like you can't handle your debt. And even though the idea is I've got one payment, well, no offense, most people who have a lot of debt, that's a hard habit to break. Being in debt, having a lot of credit cards or a lot of this, it's really a hard habit to break. And if you consolidate that and get one, what's going to stop you to go incur more debt? That might be part of the reason that it'll affect the score. The line of credit, I can remember, this was when Wachovia was in business still, Wachovia Bank. We had a line of credit on our checking. I'll just make up a number. It wasn't this much, but the number makes sense.
Million.
It was $1 million. It was $10,000, not really, but this number makes sense. Our line of credit was 10 on our checking. We owed 4. So if you look at that, that's 40%, right? Doesn't maybe look so bad, but we're only using 40%. Everybody that had a line of credit, when I got the letter from Wachovia, I thought it was me. I thought, oh gosh, what am I doing wrong? When the financial crisis was going on, they dropped everybody's limit. And so they dropped it across the board. We won't let you have 10 now, we'll let you have 6. And that affected credit scores. So now our LTV, we're using,
You're using a greater percentage now.
Yeah, using a greater percent of what's available. And to the credit score, it looks like you need to use credit. And so it's the basic guideline. And so that's going to be important. And your credit history, they're going to look at how many times have you been late on certain payments. What about the rate lock? What do you think about that? When a borrower is applying for the credit and the rates look like they're going to be going up, it looks like we're in a time where the rates are moving. Sometimes they don't much, but if it looks like that they're going to be moving, the lender might say you might want to lock in your rate, so so it won't go up. Pre-qualifying the buyers, guys, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about pre-qualifying. And what we're mainly going to talk about is conventional loans. And we're going to use 28% and 36% qualifying factors. If it was an FHA loan, the FHA loan qualifying percentages are a little bit different. FHA is 31%, 43%. Conventional loans, conforming loans are 28 and 36. Let me explain to you what that means. And we may even do some of that right now before it gets too late. I don't want us to run out of time, so we may do this next. The qualifying percentages, here's what that means. The lender will look at your income, and by the way, they're looking at gross monthly income. They're not looking at your net, your take home, they're looking at gross monthly income. This 28%, sometimes you'll hear lenders say on the front end, or you qualify on the front end. The 28% is housing. Housing means your total house payment. This means PITI. Even if you're not escrowing for taxes and insurance, the lender's going to qualify you on a monthly basis as if you are. If you have a loan and you've got the PMI, it would have to be in there. If you live in a neighborhood with homeowners association fees, that dollar amount would be within the 28% also. Here's what it means. Your housing, total housing payment cannot exceed 28% of your gross monthly income. Your housing payment, I'm not talking about Duke Power, Piedmont Gas, we're talking about housing and principal and interest. Your taxes and insurance would be a housing expense. If you live in a neighborhood with homeowners association, it would be housing. And if this is a insured conventional loan, your private mortgage insurance would all be in there. For example, T-bar would be a good way to do it. If you make $5,000 a month gross income, multiply that by 28%, and that gives you $1,400. The lender's going to say your front end, the 28% of your income, cannot exceed let me say it a different way. Your housing expenses cannot exceed 28% of your gross monthly income, and that would be $1,400 if you make $5,000 a month. Now let me say it a tiny bit different way. Your housing expense cannot exceed 28% of your gross monthly income, and it might even have to be less depending on how much debt you have. So it does not mean you can have that house payment if you make $5,000 a month. It means your housing cannot be more than that. Does everybody see that? All right, the 36% oftentimes is called the back end. So on the back end, your total debt cannot be more than $1,800 a month. Your total debt cannot exceed more than $1,800 a month. What that means is, including your housing, you cannot have debt to exceed $1,800 a month. So for example, if coincidentally your housing expenses were $1,400, everybody follow me? If that's what your housing was, then that means your other debt cannot be more than $400. Does that make sense? If by coincidence the lender says, golly, you're right on it. What we're projecting, your total housing is about $1,400. Well then, if you can only have $1,800 total for all debt, then you've got $400 left over that can cover car payment, open lines of credit cards, and that sort of thing. And that's not much debt extra for most of us. So your total indebtedness cannot exceed $1,800, and that includes the 28%. So in theory, just in theory, 28% for housing, and you could say 8% for debt, couldn't you, in theory? that could be lower, perhaps, and maybe your debt could be a little higher. Let me show you another way. What if we find out that this person can have $1,800 a month in debt? Let's pretend like their house payment came out to $1,300. So if their housing was 13, then they could have 500 in debt. Does that make sense? That makes sense? If they have no debt, their house payment cannot be $1,800. Does that make sense? If they have no debt, the lender's not gonna let them have an $1,800 house payment.
Because eventually they're gonna get it.
Because eventually you're gonna get it, and the front end says your housing can never be more than 28, because eventually, there's gonna be other debt incurred. For most of us, maybe. Uh-huh.
Would this be one of the situations where the deduction of discount points would be?
Amber said, would this be one of those examples where paying a discount point would make sense? If you had the cash and you needed your payment not to go over that, it would lower the rate, wouldn't it? And it could get your payment under. Did y'all hear, Amber? We did say discount points is interest in advance, but that's a perfect example. It might not be so crazy, we gotta get our payment down. Or if you've got money that you could have paid a point, you could be out of whack on the debt side. And the lender might say, can you pay off some of that debt so you qualify overall? In other words, everybody, if you go to the bank to apply for a loan and you look good on this side and then they see that you got a little bit too much debt, they're not going to go, shoo fly, get out of here, go. You don't qualify. They're going to say, what can we do to work this out? Now, one thing, having said that, they have to qualify on both ratios. If you're off on one, you do not qualify for the loan. They have to qualify for both ratios in order to be granted the loan. But don't you think the lender's in business to make loans? So they're going to try to figure out, do you have any other income, or can you get rid of some of this debt? So they'll try to work on that. Let me give you, let's look at something here. I want to show you, and then I'm going to give you some good hints. Let's go, if you will, to page 458 and 459. Let me find the problem I want to give you. And let me give you some hints first. You do have qualifying math on your final. So here's the hint I would take first. And I really think it'll help you, because here's what I hear a lot from students. I hear students who struggle in math, and that's most of us, say, Ms. Secor, I don't even know how to get started. And so the hint I'm going to give you is how to get started. It is the T, everybody. If you're using T or algebra, if they give you income. If they give you income, let me show you what to do. If they give you the income yearly, the second step would be divided by 12. You want monthly income. So if they didn't give it to you monthly, get it into monthly. So let's do an example. Let's say they give us $60,000 a year income. The second step would be 60,000 divided by 12, because we're qualifying on a monthly basis. So that would be my steps. If I read the problem and I see income and they're asking me, if the question says, how much can the house payment be, or how much debt can they have, and they give me income, this is what I would advise you to do. Third step, I would say 5,000 times my 28%, and I know what can be housing. My fourth step would be 5,000 divided by 36%. Now I know my numbers that I can work with, and then I would look at my question and figure out the answer. Yes, there will be questions that you don't have to do the debt side, but guys, that took me 1 second. And I think that it really helps the students who say, I don't know how to get started. Do this. And then read the questions and say, now. Now, if they give you income, do this. So look with me. I'm on page 459. Look with me at number 32. And I'd like for you to try to do number 32. How you guys doing on this? All right, what's the first step? And okay, did you guys get that? They gave the income because they're asking for how much can this payment be? How much can the housing be, or how much can the debt be? They're asking for payment. And so Justin said divide 42,000 by 12 and you get 3,500. And
Would you add in the 500 because that's the...
no, you're not adding. Why would you add? Justin said, would you add 500 where? To this?
They said he has a monthly recurring debt of 500.
Well, this is the monthly income. So if you got debt, it's gonna be minus, but not from that though. Not from the total. Okay. I've had other students ask that, so it's not a far out question. You know, would you add it to that income? I've had other students ask. But if it's debt, does it make sense it's gonna be minused out somewhere? I understand what you're asking, Justin. All right, so did you do these two steps? What's 28% of 3,500? 980. So that tells me that with this income and that amount per month, their housing expense can never go over 980. Not go over that. And it might have to be less depending on what the debt looks like. So how much debt can they have?
1260.
So their total debt can be 1,260, which would include whatever their house payment is. Now what do we do?
Minus 500.
Minus 500 from where? From the debt side. There's the clue, everybody. They said there's 500 a month debt. So what that means is their house payment is going to be affected because they're using so much out of this amount for debt. So if you minus 500 from here, then they can only have a 760 a month house payment.
You got 35,000 up there. That's
Ooh.
all right.
That's not good. I mean, that is good. All right, does that make sense? So if you've got some debt, in other words, the lender might say to this borrower, is there any way you can get rid of some of that debt so you can have a higher house payment? I mean, the lender's not necessarily trying to create more debt, but this consumer might be wanting to look at a higher price home. Well, the way you can look at a higher price home is to eliminate some of your debt. Does that make sense? So the clue is debt, start with a debt allowance. Think about this as an allowance. You're allowed $1,260 a month, you're already using 500 of it. Everybody good? You got a math question on this, so make sure you are. Go with me to one more place. They don't have many of this type of questions in your reading, or at least I haven't found it. Go with me to page 756. You got math in several sections in your textbook, but if you'll go to 756, and I'd like for you to look at number 45. And see if you can do that one. 756, number 45. Now, this is an example, they're only asking for the 28%. That's obvious, isn't it? I mean, they're not asking for how much do they have left over or anything like that. So tell me what you did, somebody. Divide 60. And then what?
Add 2,400.
Add 2,400. And then what? Times by 28. And what does that give you? Okay, what is it? Andrew, where you stuck?
No, she's explaining to me.
Oh, where are you stuck, Kristen?
I just completely didn't add the 2,400 in there. That's what I did. I mean, I didn't add the 5,000.
Why didn't you add it? Did you just overlook it?
Yeah, I didn't read it correctly, I guess.
Yeah, because there are two incomes there, right? And they just put it in different formats for you, and maybe it worked on Kristen because it confused her, didn't it? Yes, ma'am?
100 times 12 came up with that amount. That's what I went the longer route.
You put them in yearly and then added it together and divided by 12? You still got there, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Okay,
Does that work for other problems?
Sure.
That way?
sure.
Are we just essentially like complicating it?
Well, you're just doing a couple of steps you don't have to. I don't know that you're complicating it, that's the way you see it.
Right.
And so I think that's okay.
Okay.
But it is, you're doing a couple of steps that you don't have to, but if you see it that way,
It breaks it down more, I guess, because you're going off of the actual wordage of the problem.
that's right.
Okay.
That's right, that's right. Okay, let's go back then to page 459. It's as long as you're getting there, and that didn't take that much extra time. I want you to look at number 33. Now that we've done a couple, let's see if you can think through number 33. Page 459, number 33. Number 33. So this is a little more thinking, which is what level 3 is, isn't it? Which is your math. guys doing on this one? The question is, under which of the following expense to income ratios will the lender find the couple to be qualified? And what's the answer? A. Good. A lot of students pick D, neither. Anybody pick D, neither? Good. And here's why I've heard students pick D, neither. Because they read it as, or did they qualify? And that wasn't the question, was it? If the question said, do they qualify, the answer would be no. But the question is, which one do they qualify under? So did you take your income, 40,800? If you divided it by 12, what'd you get? 34. And so 28% would give you how much? Is that right, 1224? All righty, so the housing payment is projected to be $895. Do you see that there's plenty in the allowance to cover housing? $952 is more than $895, isn't it? So they're good to go there. And then they say that they've got some other debt of $425. So, well, let's just minus $425 from this and see what's left over. How much? $799. Is that enough left over to pay $895 housing? It's not, is it? Or you could have added those two together. You could have added, how many of you did that? $895 and $4. And that's more than that, isn't it? Is that the way you did it? I think that's a good way. All right, everybody, good job.